Hello and welcome to the Ultimate Escape Podcast. I'm your host, Hayden Parrish. And in this episode, episode 3, I'm joined with Steve Holladay, and we're talking about emotions. Now, God has hardwired those emotions in us. I hope you enjoy the conversation. Thanks for being here. Ultimate Escape is a family-friendly ministry that addresses sexuality. Some episodes may contain sensitive terms and subject matter, especially for younger children. Well, Steve, welcome. We're back, and today let's just jump right in and discuss, as you've counseled and as you lead through Ultimate Escape, this idea of emotions keeps cropping up. I'd love for you to speak more about sort of the origins of our emotions and how we kind of navigate them as we heal from our wounds, heal from the things that are happening, how to properly understand our emotions.
You know, emotions are such a big part of the human experience. Now, I'll confess, because anybody who knows my background has probably heard me speak about, being totally cut off from emotion. Like if an emotion had jumped up and bit me, I wouldn't have recognized it. I can still remember my experience at Bethesda Workshops. I was 33 years old. In Nashville, Tennessee. I'm being asked, "What do you feel?" And I'm staring at a piece of paper on the floor that has 8 feeling words. And I have no idea. I don't feel anything, which I think in that moment was an accurate statement. I don't feel because I was incapable of being connected to those emotions. And that was the first day of a 5-day intensive. And it wasn't until day 3 that I actually started feeling something. So I came in on Wednesday night or Wednesday afternoon for day 1. And finally by Friday morning, I'm starting to feel. And so, in this discussion today about emotion, I recognize I'm a recovering, emotionless person. When Holly and I share our story, Holly talks about, being married to me and it's just flat line. It's like if she had come in and said, "Hey, Steve, we want free tickets to Disney World." Oh, that's good. "Hey, Steve, there was a car wreck. All of our kids were killed." Oh, that's bad. Just no emotion at all. And so to go from being that guy totally void of emotion, to being way more in touch with my emotion than I ever knew that I could be, and working with people on trying to go from being shut down to turning that switch back on, has been quite the experience and the journey. So yeah, I'm excited to get a chance to talk about that today.
Love that. And so tell me more about sort of the origins of, obviously, God makes everything. And I think often we go, okay, how do I manage this part of me that comes out in anger and joy and all of these other things? Where does that come from, and how are we supposed to understand?
So if we can conceptualize, just being human as, we're spiritual beings. I mean, at our core, we're a spiritual being in a, temporarily in a physical body. And so I'm not trying to diminish or ignore the spiritual aspect. That spiritual part will live on forever, long after the physical body is no more. But during this time when we're physical beings, we're humans, we experience thoughts or beliefs. There's the thinking part of us. We engage in behavior, so there's a behavior part of us. And then there's the emotional part. Just to borrow from cognitive behavioral theory or a CBT model, that thought, feeling, behavior triangle, the emotions are a big part of that. And God designed that. God created us to experience emotions. To borrow some core feelings and some terminology from an author, Dr. Chip Dodd. He has a book. He's written several books, but one of the books, Voice of the Heart. In that, he lists these 8 core feelings. And I like the idea, he says it's like primary colors. There are 3 primary colors. We get all this variety of colors, but they're based on those 3. And so when Holly and I are teaching about emotional healing, we've got this box of 64 Crayola crayons. Well, yeah, there's 64 colors because when I was a kid, I always wanted that big box of 64.
Does it have a sharpener in the back?
Oh, yeah. Sharpener on the back. But that whole box is based on, one or a blend of three. From the three primary colors comes, all the colors that we see around. And so we can come up, if you and I sat down and said, hey, in 2 minutes, let's just list all the feeling words we could think of. We come up with a pretty big list, I'm sure. But they're all going to be grounded in these 8 core emotions. Anger, sad, hurt, lonely, shame, fear, guilt, and glad. Okay, those are 8 core feelings. And each of those feelings are designed to communicate something to us. Usually when I pop that list of 8 feelings up on a slide, people in the room are looking at that, or if it's my counseling office, the client looks at that and they said, oh, that's like there are 7 bad ones and only 1 good one. And that is a perspective to just look at those feelings and say, oh, those are like bad feelings. Well, my perspective would be that they're not bad or good. They're just neutral. Glad is not a good emotion. It's an emotion. Anger is not a bad emotion. It's an emotion. So if you imagine these 8 core emotions are like lights on the dashboard. You're driving down the road. It's 100 miles to the next gas station. You look down at your dashboard and you see that little yellow light that looks like a gas tank. And it's on. Okay, well, that alerts you to a situation. Hey, I'm going to need some fuel. I need to find a gas station before I trek the next 100 miles without a gas station. And so, okay, the question, if your low fuel light comes on, is that a bad thing?
No, I'm glad that it was there. It's good to, I'm using emotion words as I'm talking. No, I'm glad to know, because otherwise you wouldn't know that, hey, I'm about to be on the side of the road.
Yeah. If it doesn't come on, then I can get caught unaware. And so, the fact that it's on communicates there's a situation that needs help. Okay. So if I feel anger, or if I feel shame, or if I feel guilt, if I feel hurt, any of those emotions are alerting me something's going on that needs attention. Like if I'm feeling guilt, okay, let me stop and rewind. What is it that I've done that feels like I shouldn't have done it? Because at its core, guilt is behavior is inappropriate or it's bad behavior. So if I'm feeling guilty, that alerts me I've done something inappropriate. If I'm feeling shame, okay, what does it feel like? I don't measure up, or I'm not enough, or am I feeling dirty, or feel like I'm a bad person? What's going on that's causing that?
Sure.
Fear. Fear is our security doesn't feel solid. Like security feels threatened. Okay, that's fear. Now that can be real or perceived. It's like I can truly be in danger, or I can just perceive that I'm in danger, but I might not really be.
Right.
An example of that, years ago, Holly and I and our kids, we lived in the Dallas area in Allen, Texas. Our master bedroom was on the first floor, and there were a couple windows in that bedroom. And one night I woke up and I heard this brush sound against the window. I thought, oh no, somebody's trying to break into our house. We had 2 Rottweilers. So I just got up and I opened the front door and sent the dogs out. I thought, if there's somebody trying to break in, this is going to be really interesting. And I was too afraid to go out. So I just sent the dogs out. Well, the dogs came back to the door and acted like there was nobody out there. So I thought, well, let me go and investigate, and come to find out there was nobody trying to break into our bedroom window. There was a branch that in the wind was brushing up against the window. But when I woke up and I heard that sound, oh, my fear level was out.
Then you can't go to sleep after that.
The adrenaline rush is going. And so sometimes our emotions are grounded in reality, but sometimes they're based on a misperception, or we're lost in memories. And so the guilt may be coming from something that's not resolved, but it happened 20 years ago. But if I've never dealt with
Sure.
what I did that feels like it was wrong. And yeah, it may have been wrong, or I may have just perceived that it was inappropriate. So sometimes those feelings are coming from way back there.
So tell me a little bit, that story kind of sparked something. The idea of anxiety, of very, cultural, hey, everybody's talking about this idea of anxiety and how to navigate that. And from my understanding, it's like misplaced fear or fear of something that's out of your control. Where does that fit into these ideas of emotion, these 8 core emotions?
So different people will look at different models or have different perspective. I'm going to share mine.
Yeah.
To me, anxiety is the mental corner of the triangle. We talked about that thought, feeling, behavior, that triangle. Anxiety is coming from the mental corner of the triangle. My thoughts are, there's friction. My thoughts are not neatly lined up and just sitting in a place of calm or placid. There's a lot of friction going on. Now, those thoughts that are jumbled up or that may be incongruent. It's like there's okay. So the technical term, cognitive dissonance. To me, I'd use mental friction because the visualize. It's like there's this going on in my brain. Okay, that can be generating some emotion because depending on what the mental thoughts are, if the mental thought is something terrible is going to happen.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's fear. If the mental thought is, I'm a horrible person. Okay, there's shame. If the thought is, nobody cares about me, I'm all alone, or it's so that would be lonely. It's up to me. I've got to perform, or I'm going to let people down.
Yeah.
Again, that there could be fear in that. There could be shame in that. Now we've got multiple emotions that are all connected in that. Well, those emotions generate energy, and that cognitive dissonance, there's a lot of energy in that. So now all of a sudden the body's got all this energy, and if we don't know how to process that, then it just stays internal, and now we have the anxiety and the symptoms that come with that and the damage that comes with that. Because unresolved emotion, if we don't process our emotion, that emotional energy stays trapped inside. Eventually, that's going to do damage to the body. And now that would require a medical expert coming in and talking about how the body experiences damage. But I was talking to a colorectal surgeon just a few weeks ago. And he was talking about how, so much of what he does is almost a psychologist, or a counselor role, working with clients because they're sharing all these things that are going on, and that anxiety has done internal damage.
Sure. Yeah.
And so, that anxiety that can come from unresolved emotion eventually is going to take a toll physically if we're not doing something to deal with it.
Yeah. Another question, you think about men and women and maybe culturally or even biologically, how we're wired or how we're trained. As a man, you often think, I need to hide my emotion. I need to bottle it up so that I can present myself and lead, or whatever situation that you're in, whether it's your dad or you're working in a company or whatever it is. And I'm not saying women don't feel this, but I think often it's men who have trouble expressing and processing what they're feeling. Do you want to speak into that? Is this more of a cultural thing, or is it our biology? Is it some mixture of both?
I think it's a cultural thing. If you look at a 1-day-old baby, okay, babies are emotional, and babies let their emotions be seen. Toddlers in general are emotional. They're not afraid to let their emotions be seen. It's the cultural messages, the cultural scripts that get in the way of us being healthy, emotional people. Because somewhere along the way, we get these messages. Crying means I'm weak. And especially, messages like, well, big boys don't cry. Or we get shut down from having permission to let emotion out. Like, you better dry it up or I'll give you something to cry about. Long is the list of children who've heard something along those lines from a parent. Whether that be a dad, a grandparent, somebody has said, you better, you suck it up. Basically phrases that tell us emotions aren't okay. Or it's not, I don't have permission to feel. To me, that's you asked the question, is that, I think it's a cultural thing, but it happens to a whole lot of people, male and female.
Sure.
Watch a few TV shows about the workplace. And I can only imagine what it's like to be a female in a male dominated work environment. And let any emotion be seen, because I think that, the cultural script is, see, when you hire a woman or you have a female, then emotions are going to get in the way. Again, there's a cultural script there. Well, what the one cultural script is, women are emotional and men aren't, which again, not accurate, but that's a cultural belief. And the other is another buried in that concept right there. There's something wrong with having emotion, again, male or female, that, emotion gets in the way. No, emotion doesn't have to get in the way. Unhealthy emotion that's not handled in a healthy way, that can create issues. But emotion is not the problem. Emotion is not what's getting in the way. It's an unhealthy processing of it.
Yeah, it's not like you're not experiencing the emotion.
Right.
You're just holding it in.
Yeah. So so people who look like they're not feeling, they don't experience emotion. Yeah. It's not that they're not; they're just not allowing it to be seen, or they may be totally cut off from it. They don't even feel the emotion in there. Again, it doesn't mean it's not there and it's not pretty high level of energy.
Right.
They're just disconnected. And again, I get that because I lived most of my life in that mode.
It reminds me of in the Psalms, you got King David, this, peak masculinity, and yet here he is exhibiting all this a range of emotions, whether it's the way he worships with joy and celebration, or the way he mourns. And think about Psalm 42, and he says, "My tears have been my food," and just that expression of his sorrow over loss. And then you have moments where he's angry at God even, and him processing that in the Psalms. And I think what a helpful tool for us as Christians to look at the way he processed emotions. Like, hey, these are not things that are off limits for us to express. And that anger is something that we can feel. And I think often we think, oh, we just have to bottle that up, and but expressing that in appropriate ways. And maybe the question is, how do you express and process these emotions in appropriate ways?
Yeah, that's a great question that probably would take us into a whole nother episode of what does healthy processing look like. So if it's okay, let me put that one on a sticky note and stick it on the wall for just a few more minutes, and then we'll unpack that in a whole episode that gives us the time to do that. For now, can we let me just take a minute. We ran down that list of 8 core feelings, but didn't take time to really unpack what all of them are telling us. So let me do my job before we skip past that.
Love it.
Coming back. Okay. So glad is emotion that it's a resulting emotion. When something happens, we can get a dose of glad. Again, I'm just sharing my perspective. I'm not saying many other people on the planet agree with me, but here's how I look at this. When we have a desire of the heart that gets met, we get a hit of glad. I'm not saying that every desire in our heart has to be met to feel glad, just a desire. So if we look at just some of the desires of the heart, the desire to be respected, or to be wanted, or to be pursued, or to be have purpose, to be trusted. All of those are just God-given desires that all of us have. And so that desire to be admired. Okay, so somebody spends, 45 minutes in front of the mirror Sunday morning, getting ready to go to church. They got all the makeup on, every hair is in place, dressed very nicely, and they walk in the door at church, and somebody says, "You look nice today." Boom. I get a hit of glad because I spent all this time preparing to present myself in public, and somebody notices I look nice, and makes me feel good or feel glad. So glad comes from a desire of the heart that gets met. We mentioned fear, a threat to our security, hurt. Okay, hurt, just like if physically somebody hits us with a brick in the head, wow, that's going to physically hurt. Well, when we get wounded emotionally, we feel hurt. And oftentimes that either comes like an attack, somebody criticizes us, or it's a rejection that we feel. A group went off to lunch and they didn't bother to invite me, and I feel like they didn't want me, and I feel hurt. Lonely, I lack connection. Anger, I think I mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned in another conversation or if we mentioned it in a podcast, a response to injustice. Something's not right. It's Jesus. Jesus is at the temple and he observes these money changers, and he has an observation.
He actually sits down and makes a chord. Like, so he's actually processing that. It's not just he's jumping in.
Yeah.
There's some, I don't know how long that took, but there was a gap of time where he's thinking about the injustice that's happening in his response.
Yeah. And so the injustice, these people they've turned my father's house into a den of thieves. Basically, the money changers are acting unethically, inappropriately. That anger. And so typically, if we think we're angry, a quick litmus test, is it really anger that I'm feeling, or is it a different emotion that I'm confusing with anger? What's the injustice? What can I point to and say, this is not fair, it's not right, it's not the way it should be? And if I can point to something, then yeah, it's probably anger that I'm feeling. But if there's not an injustice that I can identify, then it might not really be anger. It might be fear or shame or hurt that masks as anger. Because anger gets blamed for a lot of things that it's not doing.
Right.
Trying to think just an example.
We just think, hey, raising your voice and getting red in the face is anger.
And so whether it's our emotional energy or we're noticing it on somebody else, often we mislabel somebody as being angry when they're not. An example. So Holly has shared very publicly on a podcast, a lot of places we spoke publicly. Holly has shared about her experience as a teenager in a 3-year sexually abusive relationship. Don't know how many times she was raped, but it was a lot. So we get married. Now she's not dealt with any of that sexual trauma. We get married, and the first 8 years of our marriage, I think I'm married to a really angry woman. It wasn't until we got marriage help in 2000. We got married in 1991. We began doing what I would say helpful marriage counseling in 2000. Now, we'd been to some marriage counselors, but it was not helpful in the years in between that. Come to find out, it's not anger that I'm seeing pop up in Holly. It's hurt and fear. Hurt from years of sexual trauma. I just mislabeled it because it looked like what I would see from somebody who is angry. So it can be helpful to recognize anger, that there's specific information, and if that information is not there, it's probably not anger. So let's look deeper at what it could be. Trying to think, what have I missed? Glad, hurt, shame. We mentioned shame is I feel like I don't measure up, like I'm not enough, or it can be I feel dirty, bad, like there's something wrong with me. And that's the difference in shame and guilt. Shame is around me as just like my being, and guilt is about my behavior. Like I did something wrong. I feel like I may be missing one or two of those core emotions, but that's basically the rundown on what is the information that those lights on the dashboard are trying to tell me. Because if the low fuel light comes on and I stop and I put oil in my engine, I'm not responding to the appropriate situation. And it's the same thing if we think we're dealing with one emotion, but it's actually a different emotion. So if I think somebody's angry and I respond to them based on they're angry, well, what if it wasn't anger they were feeling? So I'm responding to my wife thinking she's mad. She's actually hurt. So my response is completely in the wrong direction.
Sure. Yeah. That's really good. Steve, that was great. Thank you for sharing. And I'm looking forward to getting to the sticky note you've placed over here. I don't want to touch
about
it
how to process it. Yes, right.
But thanks for sharing.
Absolutely. Yeah.